All right. So last week, after class, I spent a little time reflecting on where we're going and kind of what we're going to try and accomplish before the end of the quarter. And I've reshuffled kind of some of our timelines. This week was really supposed to be covered in 2 weeks, but also looking at it, uh, I was going to be grasping at straws for some of these. Uh, if this was going to be 2 weeks. And so instead, we're doing it in one. And so instead of Elisha and the Conquest of Jehu, we're kind of just shifting the focus a little further and just talking about the Conquest of Jehu and Jehu's entire family. As we have been doing, I'll include a map just so you can kind of get a sense for the changes. Judah is shrinking, Israel is shrinking, the neighbors around them are growing. And part of that is because of their kings. And so I'll back up a couple chapters just so we have the context. Athaliah, the daughter of Ahab and Jehoram, they want me to open the door for them?
Is it locked? I think it may be locked. The lock's weird. Yes, thanks, Bergan. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. I'm trying to unlock. No houses. All right. Oh, backing up into the end of First Kings. So First Kings 22 or Second Chronicles 18. At that point, they're just unmarried, not unmarried, unnamed figures who are married to form this alliance between Jehoshaphat and Ahab. However, now we're starting to see their names actually show up. At the end of 2 Kings chapter 8, we get the description of Jehoram and Ahaziah, who and their reign in Judah. Jehoram is the one who marries Athaliah and, of course, their son, Ahaziah. But under this reign, we see Edom, yellow nation, rise up in rebellion. Last week we mentioned how Moab and Ammon had rose up in rebellion against the northern kingdom. Well, now it's the southern kingdom's turn to face a rebellion, and it's from the south. And it's not mentioned, but around this time, the Philistines also launch a rebellion, and they push the southern kingdom out of what is now the Gaza Strip. And so that goes on. But Jehoram, at least in the way Second Kings is written and composed, Jehoram's reign lasts all of like 5 verses. And so it's a very short mention. We know he's the son of Jehoshaphat, but in reality, he reigns for 7 years or 8 years, depending on how you want to look at it, because it's in the 7th year of his reign that the next guy becomes king. But it also says that he reigns for 8 years. It's always a confusing part because you get the idea of, well, is it 7 or 8? Which one is it? It could be 8 birthdays happened between these reigns, and only 7 calendar days, 7 birthdays of 8 calendar years. It's one of those scholars debate about what this is and how time is kept in records, and because this isn't the only place that this happens. It shows up several times through the Kings and Chronicles. As we continue, so Ahaziah becomes king, being the firstborn of Jehoram and Athaliah. And so at the end of chapter 8, it's described as Ahaziah decides to go up and challenge as well, along with his uncle Joram. They're going to raise up an army and they're going to attack now King Hazael in Syria. It doesn't go well for them. It's a catastrophic failure, as they all tend to be, because they thought they were bigger than they were. And in this moment, Joram, is struck and he is injured. We don't know what it is, but the idea is he and his nephew are taking up shelter as Joram tries to heal, and he's becoming sick because, of course, once injuries have a way of getting infected when you don't have modern medicine. And so there's only so much they can do, but that kind of brings us to the focus of this week, and that's King Jehu. So we'll go ahead and read. We'll go ahead and read 2 Kings chapter 9, verses 1 through 13. If someone would like to volunteer for that. May or I can.
I can. 1 through 13.
Yes.
Now Elisha the prophet called one of the sons of the prophets and said to him, "Gird up your loins, take this flask of oil in your hand, and go to Ramoth Gilead. When you arrive there, look for Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, and go in and have him arise from among his brothers and take him in an inner room. Then take the flask of oil and pour it on his head and say, 'Thus says the Lord, I have anointed you king over Israel.' Then open the door and flee and do not delay." So the young man, the servant of the prophet, went to Ramoth Gilead. Sorry. My hands over pages. When he arrived, the captains of the army were sitting outside, and he said, "I have a message for you, O Captain Jehu said, "To which one of us?" And he said, "For you, O Captain." So Jehu got up, and they went into the house, and he poured the oil on Jehu's head and said to him, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I have anointed you king over the people of the Lord, over Israel. You shall strike the house of Ahab, your master, so that I may avenge the blood of my servants, the prophets, and the blood of all the servants of the Lord who have died at the hands of Jezebel. For the entire house of Ahab shall perish, and I will cut off from Ahab every male, both bond and free in Israel. I will make the house of Ahab like that of the house of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baisha, the son of Ahijah. And the dogs will eat Jezebel in the territory of Jezreel, and there will be no one to bury her." Then he opened the door and fled. When Jehu came out to the servants of his master, one said to him, "Is all well? Why did this madman come to you?" And he said to him, "You know very well the man and his talk." And they said, "It is a lie. Tell us now." And he said, "Thus and thus he spoke to me, saying, 'Thus says the Lord, I have anointed you king over Israel.'" Then they hurried, and each man took his garment and placed it as a cushion under Jehu on the top of the outside stairs, and blew the trumpet, saying, "Jehu is king."
Thank you. So we finally see the last, or I guess the third, of the three men Elijah is told, "Go and anoint." First, we get Elisha, who's I guess his sidekick for a while before becoming the next big prophet for Israel. We don't necessarily know when or how exactly Elijah was to anoint Hazael to be king of Syria. However, at this point, we saw at the end of last week, he goes up against Ben-Hadad III, dethrones him, he defeats him in battle, and Hazael becomes king of Syria. And now we get Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, son of Nimshi, and we get this. We have all three, and they are going to be the means by which the northern kingdom, I guess you could argue, is redeemed. But it's really how the northern kingdom is liberated from the house of Ahab. And so what we'll end up seeing is, at least for a very brief moment, we get two competing claims to the throne of Israel. We'll have Jehu, who's the son of Jehoshaphat, son of Nishmi, and we've reached the point to where what I was trying to do earlier on, when we could trace it back to a tribe and be able to see which tribes were more influential in the kingdoms. We're getting to the point where you're kind of grasping at straws, or the scholars are grasping at straws. So now even I am grasping at less of straws than they are grasping at. And so Jehu will probably be the last one we take an educated guess on, just because they get way too confusing, especially because names have a way of changing, especially this week threw me off a lot because Joram became Jehoram, becomes back to Joram, and you have Joash and Jehash, and like it's all the same person, but their name just keeps changing verse to verse. And so that's another aside. But the guess is Jehu is of the tribe of Gad because he is of the nation, not the nation, the city of Ramoth Gilead, and Ramoth Gilead is in what would have been the Gadite territory. Anyway, so throughout chapter 9, what happens is Jehu, well, I guess 9, 10, and I'm sure there's parts of it in 11. What Jehu does is he rallies his chariot riders. He's known as a general who leads chariots. And so he first goes and chases down King Joram, who's obviously been injured, and King Ahaziah of the south. And he ends up killing Ahaziah in the chariot by shooting him. Joram doesn't necessarily flee because he's injured and can only move so quickly. So he was a little bit easier for Jehu to hunt down. However, what we see is Jehu starts crossing people off the list. You could argue, well, why is he attacking the king of Judah? Well, if we look back to the lovely family tree, he is also he would have been the grandson of Ahab. And so it's one of those moments in which the family lines have gone mixed together. And so the sins of Ahab are also the sins of the king of Judah now, because of their family. And he had fallen into the same kind of pitfalls that his grandfather had done. It is interesting. Ahaziah is one of those, well, Jehoram and Ahaziah, it's not described as they're continuing the sins of their forefathers. It's rather they're continuing well, I guess for Ahaziah, Ahab is a forefather. But for Jehoram, he's continuing in the sins of Ahab, his father-in-law. And it's one of those moments of the sins of the kings kind of are shifting and getting mixed up as well. And so Jehu goes and kills Ahaziah and Joram. And then he goes and leads a march on, I guess it's not necessarily the palace in Samaria, it's the palace in Jezreel. And what happens is he goes to execute Jezebel. And Jezebel kind of has this foolish notion that, well, no, I'm not going to die. I'm not in the capital. Why would someone who's trying to claim the throne come and attack me? Because she's full of herself. She kind of takes it as almost a challenge. And what happens is they're quickly overrun, and Jehu ends up throwing her out a window. And the prophecy that is told to Elijah by God of, well, the bones will lap up the blood of Jezebel, and they'll eat of her flesh, like the wild animals eat of her flesh as it decomposes, does come true. She doesn't get buried. She just dies out there and is fed upon. And then Jehu in chapter 10 goes on, and he clears house even more. He kills the descendants of Ahab. It's described as there being, I had it underlined somewhere, 70. He kills 70 persons who are considered descendants of Ahab. When I say Jehu's clearing house, he is clearing houses from people. And so it's one of those moments of everyone is facing punishment for the sins of Ahab, which kind of makes sense. God was very upset with Ahab, and only relented in the last seconds of what you've done. I won't punish you because you did this one thing right. Instead, I'm going to carry it out on descendants. And then what we see is Jehu strikes down the prophets of Baal. We'll go ahead and read this. 2 Kings chapter 10, verses 18 through 27. If someone would like to read that, we'll go ahead and read it.
Then Jehu assembled all the people and said to them, Ahab served Baal a little, but Jehu will serve him much. Now therefore call to me all the prophets of Baal, all his worshippers, and all of his priests. Let none be missing. For I have a great sacrifice to offer to Baal. Whoever is missing shall not live. But Jehu did it with cunning in order to destroy the worshippers of Baal. And Jehu ordered, sanctify a solemn assembly for Baal. So they proclaimed it. And Jehu sent throughout all Israel, and all the worshippers of Baal came, so that there was not a man left who did not come. And they entered the house of Baal, and the house of Baal was filled from one end to the other. He said to him who was in charge of the wardrobe, bring out the vestments for all the worshippers of Baal. So he brought out all the vestments for them. Then Jehu went into the house of Baal with Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, and he said to the worshippers of Baal, search and see that there is no servant of the Lord among you, but only the worshippers of Baal. And then they went in to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. Was it the 24th? No, what was it?
27.
27, okay, sorry. Now Jehu stationed 80 men outside and said, the man who allows any of these whom I give into your hands to escape shall forfeit his life. So as soon as he made an end of offering, the burnt offering, Jehu said to the guard and said to the officers, go in and strike them down. Let not a man escape. So when they put them to the sword, the guard and the officers cast them out and went into the inner room of the house of Baal. They brought out the pillar that was in the house of Baal and burned it. They demolished the pillar of Baal, they demolished the house of Baal, and made it a latrine to this day.
All right, thank you.
You know, in modern times, this was an example to what Solomon was saying. He called them about 500 into an auditorium there, had every one of them killed.
That's very, this week's kind of, I guess, stories are not super fun and interesting. It's a lot of nitty gritty, well, not nitty gritty. It's dark and gloomy, and it's one of those that it's kind of hard to sit there and think, oh yeah, God told them to go kill households of people. God chose Jehu to be the one to go kill hundreds of people which I'm not saying these people were doing good. They were idol worshiping, they were making child sacrifices, like they were clearly doing evil, but it's still one of those, especially in Western thought of a human life is a human life. Like it's hard to justify in one sense, God's saying that humanity is the greatest creation, is beloved so much to the point that he gave his only son, but on the other hand, he wanted another human to go kill hundreds of people because they were doing wrong. And so I'm not trying to say that Jehu shouldn't have done this. It is just one of those, especially when you're not thinking about all of the things that these people did wrong and what they represented and what they were truly exemplifying. It's not that God is acting unjustly, he is acting justly towards all of his creation, to all of his people, by allowing evil to be punished, for evil not to escape the wrath. And so I as we were reading this, I realized I put my slides out of order. So this grainy picture of people dying in the house is the prophets of Baal. And so what we get is this imagery of we're going to put them all in one place, and then we're going to wipe them out, ultimately. And then at the end of this chapter, it's only a few verses, but it's described as Jehu wipes out Baal. There's no Baal worship in the nation of Israel. However, he does not turn back completely. he wipes out one thing off the list of the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, but he still continues the rest of the list. He still continues idol worshiping. He still continues to oppress the people. He still continues to make sacrifices to other gods before Yahweh. He builds up the golden calves. Other kings have allowed the golden calves to kind of become just another idol where they picked their favorite. And for Ahab and Ahab's family, their favorite was Baal. However, Jehu returns to this idea of no, we need to make all the golden calves look real nice. Not just nice, but that should be our focus of who we offer sacrifices to. And it's described as, well, we get the reminder in verse, what is that, 30? Because you have done well carrying out what is right in my eyes, and you have done to the house of Ahab according to that was in my heart. Your sons to the fourth generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. But Jehu was not careful to walk in the law of the Lord and God with his heart. But Jehu was not careful to walk in the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all of his heart, and did not turn from the sins of Jeroboam, which he made Israel to sin. So God does say, congratulations, your descendants will be on the throne for generations. The message is very similar to that of what we hear from God on Mount Sinai to Moses. Forgiveness and blessing will happen to thirds and fourths of generations. That doesn't mean wickedness will not go unpunished, but it's kind of that moment of Jehu solidifies himself as king, and he will be the next dynastic leader of the kingdom of Israel. However, as Jehu reigns, he becomes kind of foolhardy. He begins to, I think, nothing he does can ever go wrong, and so of course God humbles him. And so what we get is Syria Syria does come down along the Jordan and divides or takes over. I guess it's not dividing. It's just taking over what was on the east side of the Jordan, and it becomes territory of Hazael, and Jehu's kind of backed into a corner to where they really only control that from Dan to Jericho, and then from the Jordan to the sea. And so it's one of those, so they come and invade this portion. Ammon is, of course, an ally of Syria. That doesn't mean they get more territory from Syria when this all happens. That just means they don't get destroyed when Syria comes in and invades. And so, once again, going back to our first map, now Israel is even smaller. And because this is no longer their territory either. So both kingdoms are starting to shrink. But we'll go ahead and change gears and jump over to the kingdom of Judah. I wanted to spend a little bit of time on Athaliah just because, one, it's the only queen in the history of Israel and Judah. Or at least only queen to usurp the throne. I'm sure Jezebel would have if she had thought about that, but she didn't, because she had, she and Ahab produced plenty of sons, and so it was one of those, she was never going to get the chance unless she wanted to kill her sons, which goes to kind of show the idea of even the most wicked of queens didn't think, killing children is good. Even she had a line where she said, that's not, I'm not going to cross that line. I'm not going to do that. And so Athaliah, however, she only has the one son, with Jehoram. And so Athaliah kind of has, not the one son. She only has one son who is of age to reasonably take the throne. She had, the others were toddlers, kind of at the time, and or they're like cousins or nephews, or like they were in the court, but they had very weak claims. And so when Athaliah becomes queen, what she ends up doing is you could argue the first one's kind of good because it strengthens Judah later on, because she pulls back the troops. They're not going to try and fight Hazael anymore because they recognize that is a losing battle. Clearly, God is not on their side when they go up to battle against Syria. And so it's a very weird picture, but it's the only one that I would argue is church appropriate.
Is that how they really would have dressed?
No,
No, I was like, that doesn't seem right.
these are very much European influenced, or European ideas of what ancient Middle Eastern garb would have been. Because we even saw it with this picture.
Yeah, I was thinking that with the feather.
Yeah, that's not necessarily how they were dressing. And Joram would not have been wearing a yarmulke either, because that doesn't happen in this time. And so, anyway.
I didn't notice it was a yarmulke, but now I see it.
Yeah, and so, yeah, this is not necessarily how they would dress, but it is one of those pictures that is in some art museum, and it's one of the very few examples that is one good quality to put on a PowerPoint, let alone church appropriate to show in Bible class. And so it's it gets weird. Anyway, so Athaliah becomes queen, and she pulls back the troops, but what she ends up doing at that point is then this is when she stops being a good ruler. At least she's not doing good. She's doing evil. What the main reason why she wanted to pull back the troops is so that she could clear her own house, and so her claim to the throne could not be usurped from her. She kills her own children. She kills the nephews, the cousins, anyone who might have a claim to the throne. The whole royal family is trimmed down in this moment because, especially those who are living in or around Jerusalem, because, well, Athaliah does not want to lose authority over the kingdom, which is also another thing that I found interesting. Athaliah is like queen for 6 years, and yet we barely talk about her. Not because, I think part of it's because we don't talk about really any of these guys as much, but it's still one of those, you'll hear a few kings and queens, like Ahab and Jezebel. At least for me growing up, we heard about them all the time. But like, and you kind of heard about Jehu, and you kind of heard about some of these guys. Athaliah, I knew nothing about until putting this study together, which is good because it gives me plenty of stuff to talk about when I'm teaching you guys about it. However, what happens with Athaliah, I don't know why one of them has Princess Leia hair. And so it's one of those, what happens is Jeshoba, one of the servants of Queen Athaliah, and she's a daughter of King Joram of Israel. So it's Athaliah's niece, but it's on the good side of the family for Athaliah because, well, Athaliah wouldn't be competing with a niece who has a claim to the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And so it's a very weird, like, why is this person spared? But anyway, Athaliah and one of the servants of the temple takes the youngest of the sons, and well, not just any servant, it was his nurse. They take the youngest son, Joash or Jehoash. His is the name that keeps switching between, it's the same person, or at least one would think it's the same person because they go through the same life events.
Why does the name switch?
It's part of it is because it switches between Second Kings and Second Chronicles. Part of it's you could argue it's because the alphabet slightly changed from the time Second Kings is written to Second Chronicles, because Second Chronicles is written after the return from the exile or sometime around then. So I think it's partially the H sounded different, or the O could make certain sounds. It's kind of similar to how our English language, there's words that don't make any sense because they're old English words that just kind of carried through, but we wouldn't say it that way. It's like how the British put a U in every word that we just put an O in. And so it's one of those, like color doesn't need a U, but they have a U. But
They pronounce the lemon different.
yeah, it's,
I remember like in one of the Bible classes that I was in at LCU, like they said that sometimes like the names indicated like allegiances to like either their religion or like their country. It's not any kind of change like that, or
not for the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah. Because like Nebuchadnezzar, so it's a name. I'm not gonna even try and spell it, but it's Neb, because that's, think of Nebuchadnezzar. Neb is just showing that it's a Babylonian name. Ra is meaning his allegiances to the Egyptian sun god Ra. That's how he was named after. Zidane is probably one of those, just kind of gets lumped together. Ben Hadad is the son of Hadad, which Hadad is either the man's name or there's a god named Hadad. And so it's one of those, that's more of what I think they were getting at. Here, Jehoash, I don't think really makes that.
Is it one letter?
It's O to EH.
Oh.
And at least that's how it changes in English. And so it's one of those, it's probably just the sound changed, so they changed the letter or.
Is it possible it could be a typo? Like, you know how like some people, they're like, their name is Caroline, but they get called Carolyn, right? It's like super similar.
It could be one of
easily
those.
get like mistyped or miswritten.
Written, yeah, especially if you're taking an oral transcription and you're like, huh, how am I supposed to spell that? And then you write it down. But
Sorry, I was just curious.
yeah, it's not that big of a deal.
It's just.
However, Jehoash, he's hidden in the temple. And I included this on our handout. Sorry, there's not that much on the handout this week, but it's okay. Let's spend some time thinking about what is the story. What does the story sound like to you? A young child being hidden from a power-hungry ruler. Sounds like Moses, and he's being hidden in the temple or hidden with God. Moses does stick out. But I think we can also think of some New Testament examples.
Jesus was in the temple, hiding out in his
running
father's
from
house.
Herod.
Jesus did run from Herod. I wouldn't necessarily, he wasn't hiding in the temple. He was just in the temple.
His parents didn't know where he was.
It wasn't hiding.
That's
Maybe,
true.
maybe David.
David, how so?
Well, I mean, he ran and God protected him
Yeah.
from the dark and creation.
Yeah, I guess. This is your answers. I'm not saying there's any right or wrong answers. Now, if you were to say, it sounds like Ahab, yeah, that's kind of a wrong answer. But what other stories does this remind you of a young child being hidden with God? If we don't have anything else, that's fine too. I can just keep talking. And
Oh, I thought there
It
was
was
another
just
answer.
it was just food for thought.
yeah.
I thought you were withholding it. I was like,
No.
no.
I thought I was gonna lead you to your next point.
No. The next part is Queen Athaliah dies. So Queen Athaliah dies. And what happens is when Jehoash becomes older, It's not very old, but it's old enough to actually be able to talk and think. It's some will argue it's as young as 7. Some will say it's probably closer to 12. Who knows? It's somewhere in there. We know he was hidden for almost 6 years, and so it's one of those. Okay, it doesn't necessarily change the whole story of a baby being hidden versus a 6-year-old being hidden. It's still a child being hidden with God. And what happens is the priests of the temple decide it is time for Jehoash to become king. We are tired of living under the oppression of Queen Athaliah. And so what they end up doing is they start leading the people kind of through the streets, with Jehoash. They're putting some protection around him. The temple guards are marching along with them, and then soon the security, the Queen Athaliah begins to rally behind King Jehoash, or I guess he's not king yet, Prince Jehoash, and they begin creating a ruckus. It's very similar to what we see with the triumphal entry of Jesus. We also see this going back to one of David's sons. Which one is it? Adonijah. Not Adonijah. Absalom. Going back to Absalom, when he enters Jerusalem, it's one of those, the people are clearly making it known, this is who I want leading me. Now this goes a little bit different than what happens with David and Absalom and with Christ and I guess the Romans. The usurper actually succeeds in usurping. Part of this is it's hard to command troops to defend you when all your troops decide, no, we don't want you to be commanding us. We'd rather have a prepubescent child leading us. And so what ends up happening is they kill Athaliah there in the palace courts, and they end up taking this child and they anoint him. Again, he did not look that old when he was that young. He did not have the full grown man head on a child's body. But again, that happens a lot in European renditions of art. There we go. So yes, Jehoash reigns in the temple, and well, I guess it's 3 letters because it's A-E-H-O versus just O, and so again, that's kind of a weird change to have made to be made. But Jehoash becomes king, and the one main thing he does is he begins restoring the temple. He is not going to be like his uncles or his counterpart in the north. He's not going to be like his father or even his grandfathers, unless we're going back to Asa, because Asa also kind of did this. But it's one of those, he decides we are going to raise funds and we are going to do this. We're going to refurbish the temple. We're going to devote the wealth of my forefathers. We're going to devote the wealth of my forefathers, and we're going to restore the temple. We have allowed it to be ransacked, and so all of the glory of what Solomon had put in there is all gone, and we are going to put the money back in. And what we end up seeing is Jehoash gives up or gives authority to the temple officials. You can raise money from the people. You can bring it in and you're supposed to make a collection. You're supposed to do this. And then after a few years, he's like, all right, surely we have raised enough funds. And the temple, the leaders of the temple were like, no, we didn't. And Jehoash says, "What do you mean we didn't raise any money?" And they're like, "Sorry, we don't have any. We didn't store it up." And they're like, "Where'd it go?" And it was one of those, I don't know. Or at least that's kind of how I think of how it went. And so instead, what we see is kind of the groundwork of what will become the offering box in the synagogues and the temples, and even now in modern churches of Jehoash said, okay, since we can't be trusted to just have money laying around in the temple, because some people have sticky fingers, we're going to put it in a locked box that only a few people have access to, and they will be in charge of managing and keeping the money. And yeah, it's one of those where you're like, what do you mean you don't know? You meant you kept it all? Like, where do you think this went? As he's probably wearing the nicest clothes you could buy, but it's also one of those, they established this offering, but it's also where Jehoash kind of interferes, and he's not super popular with some of these priests and the temple officials, because they'll say, no, you're actually supposed to be giving of your own paycheck too. You're not supposed to just keep taking money that comes in. You don't get to count all of the money that comes in and then divide it amongst yourselves and then say, well, we ran out of all the other money. And so it's one of those moments of, no, we need to be financially sound with what we're doing. Well, the rest of this week is kind of just going over, setting up for next week. So Jehoash dies, and his son Amaziah. I don't know. It throws me off because it looks like Amazon, but it's not. And so I start saying it like Amazon, but it's not. So yeah, I don't know. I'm also not good with English, so.
Amazing, yeah, it's not English, just understand.
Thanks, Ashley. Anyway, so setting up for next week, Amaziah, I don't know, becomes king of Judah, and what we see is it's a very short lived reign, but we will talk about him next week because he's really just a stopgap to get to his son Uzziah, and then we get Jehu dies, and Jehu's son Jehoaz reigns for a brief time, and then it's again another kind of stopgap, just getting us to where we're going. Jehoash, who is not the same Jehoash, it's a different Jehoash. Same name, same difference in spelling will occur. Just opposite. Kings has it Joash for the king of Judah and Jehoash for the king of Israel. But Chronicles it's switched.
Great.
So it's excellent, exactly what we want. But going back to this idea, what we see at the end of chapter 13, Elisha dies. It's one of those moments where it's a little weird because the person coming to Elisha, I guess it's Joash the king, comes, and which is weird because at the end of chapter 12 he dies. So him being back in chapter 13, it just goes to show this is not meant to be read in one clear reading. Anyway, at the end of Elisha's life, we get this moment where the king of Judah comes in, or maybe it is the king of. No, this is one of those moments where the name switched. Now I get it. So Jehoash, king of Israel, comes to Elisha and says, "What is going to happen when we go up to the battle of the Syrians?" And he says, "Shoot an arrow at the window," which has to be again one of those moments of you have to sit there and think, "What?" That's not answering my question whatsoever. It's not even related. But okay, Elisha. And so it's one of those, they shoot it, the Lord's arrow of victory is proclaimed. And it's the idea of you will go up against Syria, I think it's 6 times, and on the 7th time you will have completely struck out Syria. And then there's a but clause. But you won't actually be the one to do the 6 times. The 6 times will be carried out over generations. This won't be something long lasting. And what we end up seeing is they don't actually fill the 6 times within at least this period of Israel's life, or the kingdom of Israel's life, not Israel's life. Israel died in Genesis. And so anyway, what we get is this last little bit, and then Elisha says, all right, I'm going to die. And he dies. And they just kind of bury him. They do the bare minimum. The idea is, well, not the idea. What happens is either they don't finish burying him in the ground, or they put him kind of in a tomb, but they don't seal it. So his bones are just kind of laying out, not directly to where you can just, oh, there's Elisha. But it is one of those where he's not covered. Because what ends up happening is Moab will come up against Israel again, and one of the Moabite servants just falls over dead. And he gets thrown into this pit where Elisha's bones are. And as soon as he touches the bones of Elisha, the servant stands up and crawls out the grave like nothing had happened. And so it's, again, another one of those moments where you're sitting there and you're thinking, what? But in one of the 3 times that Joash, king of Israel, gets to lead an attack on Syria, King Hazael dies. And of course, if Joash, the king of Israel, is reigning, that means obviously his grandfather is dead. And so what we end up seeing is the 3 men that Elijah was promised to be the end of Ahab, at this end of this age, this prophecy, this time period has truly come to an end. What we'll see is there's not going to be another prophet of Israel that is of the caliber of Elijah or Elisha. There's not truly a threat like Hazael to Israel until the final days when Assyria is knocking on the door. We don't see another purging, I guess, of Israel like Jehu leads them on overthrowing the house of Ahab. We'll end up seeing later is, yeah, there's kings killing kings, but it ends up being a lot of generals who claim that they were king for a month, and then another general came in and reigned for 6 months, and then another general came in and claimed the throne. But that's all for next week. Next week, we won't focus a whole lot on the southern kingdom. We'll mention a few just because they have some involvement with the fall of the north. But what we will see is and focus on is the last couple years of the northern kingdom of Israel. So that's where we'll pick up next week. Do you have any questions? All right. Again, we got out a couple minutes early, so I guess we can beat the teenagers down the stairs. But
Is that what your goal is?
No.
Is to run?
I know. Yeah. But thank you all for being here. That's all I've got. So thank you.